is acquired by the domain and becomes a part of the territory under its control, it is treated as the property of the domain. The space station near the planet Earth is important only because it lay a path of the domain expansion route toward the center of the Milky Way galaxy and beyond. Of course, everyone in the domain is aware of this, except for the people of Earth.
What's up with the moon? It's really strange.
The moon has sufficient mass that it should have deformed into the state of least energy, which is a sphere. Why hasn't it done that?
What do you think?
I am willing to consider that the moon has been geoengineered.
It was dripping this syrup-like syrup viscosity, this liquid. It was everywhere, all down, everywhere when we went down there because there was plants and everything. It was weird. It was a purplish green color, and you could tell it was just weird. It's hard to explain. It kind of like it was like it seemed to just like be alive. I mean, it was almost like if you're looking like something organic. And I don't know. I couldn't tell. It didn't look like anything we would make, like machine parts or anything.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Thanks for being with me. The sDm Files, episode 15. Everyone, make sure to check out all the links down in your breadbasket. We put all the things down there. We put even extra stuff in there. It's been a big couple of weeks for ufology. Come find me, x.com/shotdownmine. We'll do the thing together. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends. Here we go.
The second person might possibly be Jiddu Krishnamurti. He is from India, but he actually was in the United States during the 1940s. He lived in Ojai, California, which is known as a bit of a hub for sort of this spiritual and sort of esoteric practices. But apparently during the 1940s, particularly during World War II, he stayed relatively quiet and withdrew from public talks. And then in the late 1940s began re-engaging with public dialogue and writings. So, extremely interesting that both of these people would have been name-dropped. Now, did the author Lawrence Spencer have access to the internet when he wrote this book? Yes. Is it possible that he just somehow, Googled a few names back then that who may have been prominent figures? Of course. But does that make it any less interesting? I don't think so.
Captured Alien Explains Reality. Matilda MacElroy, Part 2. Oh, this is really fun. AREA52, Chris Ramsay. This is the only guy in the last 2 weeks in all of ufology to do anything that has to do with aliens. And he is reading through a fictional book about a lady interviewing an alien, which is the only survivor of the Roswell crash. This is the only guy in all ufology to be even talking about aliens, really. I guess one other example with the Y-Files and mantids. And that's, to me is significant because the only other guy who's really talking about it was Eric Davis when he's answering questions at the UAP hearing, and he goes into an explanation about the 4 kinds of aliens that are visiting Earth. So everybody else is talking about, isn't really talking about aliens. I guess the Nazca people, the Nazca mummy people, are kind of talking about aliens, except for even the Nazca mummy people are telling us that the mummies aren't aliens, or they don't know. They don't know if they're aliens, right? Because they seem to be older than humans, so anyways. This is fun stuff. I like listening to Chris Ramsay read the alien interviews and the 4chan stuff and the Lacerda files. It's fun. What he's basically doing here is he's reading a book, a UFO book, fiction. Like I said, about a lady who says that she was the chosen kind of translator for the sole survivor of the Roswell crash, in which she says that there was one alien that lived through the crash, and it was kind of like the pilot engineer, and it would speak to her telepathically, and it chose her and wouldn't talk to any of the other humans, or maybe she was the only human at the time that was able to communicate with her, to hear her, and that the alien explained to her that she wasn't really a she, but she identifies as a she because she, she has the mother creator energy, and that her particular type of alien is just a consciousness energy thing that is able to interface with like a drone type body. That's the body that they have that isn't really a living body. It's a body that's made up of electromagnetic lines and circuits and advanced technology that the alien consciousness interacts with and synchronizes with, and is the actual power source for the alien body drone. And Matilda, who was like a doctor, was able to telepathically communicate with the alien and eventually teach it English, and get it all sorts of books on all the subjects: religion, engineering, war, and that the alien, in a very short time period, at first 15 days and then a few months after that, was able to kind of go through and read and absorb more material than that doctor had in her whole life, and so it was a subject material expert on all sorts of topics. It says its name there is Airl. So Matilda is the translator for Airl. Airl won't communicate with any other humans, basically. At some point, after kind of learning English and learning all these topics and reading all these books and staying awake every night for 15 days is what it says at first, but then eventually it's like a couple months after that. She then explains everything to Matilda about her coming from a alien nation, the domain that has ownership of Earth, and she's a pilot engineer. It was part of the expeditionary force that's keeping an eye on Earth for different reasons, and that she won't tell us anything really beyond that because it's not time for us to know that stuff yet. And then we're only in part 2, so as far as where we're at in the story is that the alien has lived through Roswell, is super old, has an immortal conscious spirit that is inhabiting this kind of manufactured electromagnetic body, and that the other little aliens that were on the ship with her were like also kind of like biodrones, but not the same kind of biodrone. So they were really just like little clone entities that really had very singular tasks. Airl's kind of like a different kind of like Vorlon kind of alien. And she tells Matilda she's been waiting around for like the download. She sent off communication to the domain that she crashed her spaceship and got captured by humans. What do I do now? And they finally answered her. Some of the first questions that she answers when she's talking to the humans is like, is there other aliens like her? Yes. Are they gonna come for her? And she says yes. And that's kind of it. I think that's where we're at in part 2 of the story. And he's saying, you go buy this book and read it yourself if you're really so vested in the story, which isn't such a bad idea. But the reason I point this out is because it's fun. I like this is an hour-long episode. The part 1 was about an hour. Like I said, I kind of like I like Chris Ramsay. I like Area 52. So it's fun time for, doing some other task or falling asleep or whatever happens to be. But he's been developing a canon and an agenda where he explains to you, as part of being a magician, the magicians will tell you that the real thing is not real and that the not real thing is real. And so when the magician says this is not real, that you should pay attention to that because that's the actual real thing. And so right after telling you that, then he says, okay, let's read the story that's not real, that's fictional. So Chris Ramsay, the magician, Area 52, is presenting this fictional story as real. And so that's fun. And this isn't the first installment. He calls it Debriefed episode 38. It's kind of the 38th episode of him reading through stuff that he's found on 4chan and books and etc. and telling you straight up, this is fiction. And then reading through it and also asking you to suspend disbelief as we go through this story and kind of experience it. So there's a huge series that you could pay attention to of Chris Ramsay, Area 52, kind of walking through these fictional things as not really fictional, right? So this is really fun. And it's fun to pay attention to. And, this is actually one that we could go bring up. Let's go get him here. He had an excellent, write-up on his Twitter. I think this is it. Here it is. 10-parter. Lays it all out, right? So he says, if I was seeding life across the galaxy, I would not send explorers or ambassadors. I would send systems. I would place mobile construction units at the bottom of the oceans, not just one, but many, spread across the planet. Each would quietly pull from local materials using whatever the planet provided, and their job would be simple: build, deploy, and maintain fleets of specialized craft for specific purposes. And so he lays out his theory of what all this stuff is. Right? And that it's the creator seeding life throughout the galaxy, basically for the purpose of seeding life across the galaxy. And that all these things, the UFOs, the things that we see, are just the various systems managing and helping out and reporting on the life being seeded throughout the galaxy. Right, so he's got, a thesis going on. And he's a really good storyteller. And so as he says, don't pay attention to this over here, it's not real, it just makes me want to pay attention to what he's saying isn't real all that much more.
Carbon dioxide, outgassing water vapor, things like that. So anomalous lights, things, it really looks like there's some kind of activity on the moon right now. I don't know the explanation for it. I don't know why carbon dioxide is being outgassed from the moon. But carbon dioxide seems to suggest, carbon dioxide you associate with plants, with vegetation. Water vapor.
Well, the
coming
moon,
out of the moon.
The moon's super weird. So Apollo 10, right? It took off from the moon and it rang like a bell. And NASA became very confused. Then in Apollo 11, they put seismometers in the moon to measure this effect. They intentionally crashed the booster, the first stage of the lunar module in Apollo 11, back onto the moon, and it rings like a bell for 3 hours.
3 hours.
So they're like, what the hell's going on here? And it turns out that if you excavate, if you dig on the moon, lower sediment layers on the moon actually are newer than higher sediment layers. So it's the exact inverse, and it actually pattern matches to an excavation site. So you think that there might be a little camp out from this past civilization
I don't know.
on the moon?
But in the spirit of the outrageous hypothesis, let's consider it.
Okay, I like that.
Jesse Michels, the American alchemist, Randall Carlson, the moon is an alien satellite monitoring Earth. So this is a really fun interview. It's super long. It's 3.5 hours. I think they should have titled it something else. They should have called it like Jesse Michels and Randall Carlson Hang Out. It's a really fun interview, and I really wanted to include it as kind of like a way to get up, because I wanted to include it because Randall Carlson is on Jesse Michels. Jesse Michels is kind of solidly in the ufology category, so it was a way to kind of get up adjacent to Randall Carlson without going full Randall Carlson. And still, if you watch this sucker, if you pay attention to this 3.5 hour interview, then you get Randall Carlson pretty fucking hard. And so another reason that I wanted to include it is kind of take another swing at the moon, because I did an episode. Actually done 2 episodes in the past on the moon, and one got entirely nuked by YouTube over time, and I'm sure got me in trouble on a couple other videos. And then the second one that I did didn't get nuked, but is the only video to ever get any type of strikes against it, and in the aftermath of that, has ended up being, kind of a Frankenstein of what it started as, because it had to get cut up for copyright. And so even then, the moon video that I made was about, or featured a lot of me talking about the movie Moonfall, which I think is a great movie, science fiction movie for you to watch if you're interested in all the moon conspiracy theories at all, because it's got it all in there. It's got anything moon conspiracy related in it, and it's presented really well. They did a great job with the production. It's got just enough entertainment and action and lameness that you can pay attention to it for the 2 hours that the movie is. I think Halle Berry's in it as like the hero. Right? And so I there's a clip of that movie that's like 30 minutes long, where the guy that I would now call young Randall Carlson, Sam from Game of Thrones, explains everything about the moon, all the conspiracy theories, and even the debunking of the conspiracy theories in like less than 2 minutes. And so you could go watch the whole movie Moonfall. It's like just over 2 hours, almost twice in the amount of time it would take you to get through this Randall Carlson interview, and he talks about all the same things. So that's the reason I wanted to include Randall Carlson, and the moon is kind of a way of taking another swipe at the moon. They've got it all in here. The moon ringing like a bell. The astronauts not feeling that great when they came back. The decommissioning of the Saturn program, and the destruction of the technology that America had created in order to get through the Van Allen radiation belt and land people on the moon. So they kind of go through it all. They even, and that's, in the first 30 minutes. And then the rest of the 3 hours is kind of, we're getting to see kind of a fun side. The fun side of Jesse Michels that everyone talks about that you never get to see in any of his interviews is him kind of obviously befriending Randall Carlson and then pestering the hell out of him at every opportunity he gets over every fun conspiracy topic that he can basically come up with. And so this interview is a compilation of him really just pestering the hell out of Randall Carlson about the moon, lost civilization theories, Atlantis, and it's the Atlantis conspiracy theories and how it's related to the moon, which they then get off into all the different places where Atlantis can be and why he doesn't think that they are in any of those places. And he thinks that the capital of the nation of Atlantis is, basically somewhere around the Bermuda Triangle, or it's in the ocean, in the Atlantic, and not in North Africa. Even though he says, well, obviously, whatever that is in North Africa is a remnant of Atlantis, a colony of Atlantis. They get pretty deep into the weeds of kind of tracing the Egyptian and Greek and Platonic story of Atlantis and all of its precursors, which is pretty fun. And so, I don't know, if you're kind of a ufology person, I'd kind of assume that at least adjacently that you would be interested in the topics that Randall Carlson ends up being an expert in and talking about. But you've probably been at least exposed to them, even if you're not very interested in them. And so Randall Carlson is not always a fun watch because it's pretty dry. It's full of a lot of academic info on whatever the topic is. Whether you're talking about geology or numerology or history of the Masons or the history of the pyramids, etc., etc., etc. And then on top of that, I've criticized Jesse Michels on several occasions that it often seems like his guests, especially at the end of the interview, don't really like him very much. He doesn't always get along really, really well in that Joe Rogan way, or that Chris Ramsay way, or the Jeremy Corbell way, or the Timothy Alvarino way, or the Chris Kumo way, or even the Ross Coldhart way of kind of becoming friends with the subject of the interview. Most of the interviews come off as really dry. They're just kind of like academic interviews of a person who's an expert in some area. And even the questions he asks, the way he asks the questions, it all kind of has to get smoothed out in the production. They do a really good production, the American Alchemist at the Jesse Michels podcast. And so this interview and the Harold Malmgren interview don't really seem to fall into that description, right? And they, I don't know if it's on purpose, if it's the production kind of smoothing it all out, because they've been picking up what we're putting down about Jesse Michels. But several times him and Randall kind of even address it directly that, man, we're pals, and we weren't expecting to be pals because I'm an old dude and you're a young dude, but we've become really good friends. And at some point I was looking for someone to mentor, and you were looking for someone to mentor you, and we couldn't make it work as far as me moving to LA or wherever they talked about. And so at any rate, Randall Carlson and Jesse Michels are like true, genuine, authentic friends. And, it kind of shows as you're watching them talk, the way they're talking. I don't know if it's a production thing or not, but it seems like the interview moves around Randall Carlson's house, right? Because they need to get more comfortable, or they need more access to the computer, or at the end when they're just starting to get tired. So that's why I said I guess they did want to keep the moon in the topic, or in the title, because that kind of is the topic of the 3.5 hour interview. But I would put some more in there about how this is like a day in the life of Jesse Michels and Randall Carlson just being buds, So it's fun. You should definitely listen to it. We don't get a lot of UFOs and aliens in there. We get a little bit, right? And that's why I say we are definitely adjacent with Randall Carlson as we talk about ancient alien theory or ancient astronaut theory or constant companion theory that the aliens and the UFOs are at least related to, or could possibly be, something with older human or older Earth civilizations that still have pieces of them around. And the way that they kind of talk about that in the interviews, that the moon seems to be, at a very minimum, it's been geoformed by someone with the technology to geoform the moon. And that secondly, as we get into Randall Carlson's topic, is we know that there has been cataclysms on Earth, basically due to torrid meteor shower, meteors smashing into the planet on occasion, and that it's kind of a cyclical thing that goes on. You have a civilization on the planet get to a point where it knows that the planet's going to get smashed by asteroids and destroy all civilization, and that they then build some precautions to kind of save some knowledge, save some parts of civilization, and that one of those places where they build a holdout or build a place where they could kind of hang out while the planet was being smashed by asteroids would be the moon, and that they think that there's still some remnants of those past civilizations on the moon, hanging out, watching over the planet, right? And so Jesse Michaels kind of addresses as like he's kind of pestering Randall Carlson with these preposterous ideas, and that lets Randall Carlson kind of jump off into his Younger Dryas catastrophe theory. So it's very, very fun. I think right there, he's explaining the asteroid stream of asteroids that started as a big asteroid, was captured by Jupiter, dissolved into 27 other smaller asteroids that then, smashed into the planet one at a time, causing extreme catastrophe. And that the same thing has happened in the past on Earth and will happen again in the future, destroying everything on the planet in ridiculous, immeasurable cataclysm. Randall Carlson, the moon.
I thought it pertinent to start digging into some of the details with Jonathan and then be able to do my own research and exploration. Some of these added details included Jonathan describing that the Men in Black camis were there on site first. That was a huge question I had going into this, whether to kind of ponder if that team arrived on the CH-47s with the DOE Nest, probably, team, or that they had arrived first. Now, the fact they arrived first, according to Jonathan, gives even more credence to these were local special forces. Now, of course, he didn't describe seeing any vehicles, but in my opinion, the 7th Army Green Berets probably utilized Humvees or nearby vehicles to arrive on scene first. Another key point here was the multinational group, that these Germans, these Chinese, they were all armed. Now that is a massive detail as well, and one that I'm still trying to solve here, because of course we've heard of multinational recovery teams, specifically with Five Eyes Nations, and Canadian politician Larry Maguire kind of writing to his own Minister of Defense in Canada saying we need to get information about UAP because of Five Eyes projects and maybe retrieval teams.
UAP Gerb, 1997, Peru, UFO Crash Retrieval, the story of Jonathan Weygandt. It's another interview. UAP Gerb has gone to Jonathan Weygandt, become his pal, and has re-interviewed him. And he says as a part of doing this interview, he's gone out and gone through every detail and reconstructed everything that Jonathan Weygandt said back in 1997. And so you would see Jonathan, and he's featured prominently in anything that's kind of Greer related. And he's one of, Greer's 1,000 different witnesses that you can find in his library, in stuff that he has on YouTube, stuff that's being produced in his movies, and even in his, his private archives on his Greer website. So, basically until today, Jonathan's been a Greer camp witness. And so I don't think that UAP Gerb's interview changes anything about this guy being in the Greer camp. And there's a group of stories that are just like this story, right? Kind of regular U.S., American military servicemen doing kind of regular American military servicemen stuff, right? He's in the foreign countries. He's in Peru. He's near Peru. He's doing an aid mission where the military's there to do humanitarian relief and provide aid and fill sandbags and rescue people from hurricanes and etc. So he's kind of doing one of those things. UAP Gerb gets into the real details. Is what they're really doing is supporting American military assets in Brazil and Peru and Argentina that were helping those countries, or the regimes of those countries, to fight against the drug cartels and track aircraft as they move people and supplies and drugs around the region, and to shoot them down and then go and recover them, or go and fight with the guys that are also trying to recover them, etc. So not much of that geopolitical backdrop is included when you watch Weygandt interviews in the past. It's usually just kind of briefly gone over as to, what he was doing there. And so then his encounter, and like I said, there's a lot of encounters, a lot of witnesses that there's other people who are involved in this encounter, but there's lots of encounters just like this that play out in the same way. Servicemen doing servicemen stuff, stumbles onto black ops, secret ops, private ops, DOE recovery team people doing UFO recovery team stuff out in the middle of the jungle. And so him and his team find a UFO. It's been shot down or it's crashed. They are checking it out, and what they run into is not aliens, and it doesn't seem to be Brazilian military or cartel military guerrillas. What they run into is a DOE, Department of Energy, crash retrieval team, special ops, black ops, guys who are recovering or assisting in the recovery of this downed UFO. And you kind of follow it out on the Stephen Greer side of things, and Hill saying he has witnesses that say, well, that was not an alien UFO. That was American Black Op DOE alien reproduction vehicle UFO that was involved in human smuggling and not sex trade smuggling. What we hear talk about in kind of current modern ufology is that what those guys are smuggling is they're smuggling people and families and genetic material of psychic people, right? That they are harvesting for all sorts of reasons, to use in their experiments, to train as soldiers, or to basically become government equipment, so to speak, in calling or speaking to or fighting with or dealing with and interacting with the aliens and the UFOs, the actual aliens and the UFOs, right? And so as he sees the UFO and he gets closer to it, some Black Op guys, capture him, take all his weapons, beat him up a little bit. Eventually, because he got some of the, spaceship goo on him and on his uniform, he gets actually sequestered. He doesn't get released back out into the wild, so to speak, for a few days after they've figured out that he's not gonna, die of contamination, whatever it happens to be. They kind of just hint at all these things throughout the interview. They don't, and even in past interviews, they don't ever really kind of get into it in any kind of concrete detail. Because it does seem weird that they would scoop this guy up, threaten to kill him, and then just let him go. Right? So that's kind of how they always get past that, is they say, well, they figured out that he wasn't going to have any physical evidence of the space goo, or he wasn't going to die from that, or somehow, or he's we got enough info on this character, the bad guys do, that they're able to then have a head start on him and get to the media and get to the authorities and kind of start discrediting him immediately. But even in 97, which is when this guy's coming out, which is after the event, after he's out of the military and everything, that the bad guys, these Black Op DOE Special Forces guys, didn't just, ice him in the jungle like they threatened to do to him. That no one would ever know, no one would ever care, right? And that seems to be true. Like, if they just iced him in the jungle, we wouldn't have this interview, we wouldn't have the James Fox interview, we wouldn't have the Greer interview of all this happening. So that, to me, is kind of like one of the biggest red flags in the whole story, is that for some reason they thought this guy was important enough to scoop up and check out and threaten, but then they did just let him back out into the wild to basically tell this story later, right? And so here's some of the funnest stuff of this interview, is that UAP Gerb, in classic ufology fire hose fashion, goes through and researches all these other things that are involved with this guy telling his story, which is that there is quite a bit of story that you could get involved in if you want to take it down this path of the United States government being involved in with these other governments in fighting against the drug trade, kind of officially. And that was really good cover for what was going on with the DOE retrieval teams that are out there tracking, shooting down UFOs and retrieving them. And then there's the Greer spin on the back end that none of these things that we're seeing or hearing about really are alien UFOs. These are government black program ARV UFOs. And so, for whether this thing was shot down or crashed, the assets, the special teams, the Black Ops DOE guys had to come and rescue the crew and the people that were being transported from, Peru to America because they were psychic. And that this guy, caught a glimpse of that operation going on. And that if this UFO was an alien UFO, it was shot down by Peruvian or Brazilian or Argentinian controlled American anti-aircraft systems that they had put into place as part of the drug war. And so this is fun. This is fun research from UAP Gerb, as he really puts all of this into context. And again, there's another section back here where he says the other Marines, where he's tracked down all these other guys who were involved with Jonathan Weygandt and what they were doing before and after, the kinds of things that they're involved in, the kinds of things that the American government was officially doing, and all these other things that we've been able to kind of link up to what the DOE forces and assets were also doing, both officially and unofficially. But either way, we basically got them on film, or we got witnesses seeing them do it. And so that's why I think that this interview is really fun. Is it's kind of UAP Gerb grinding his axe against the DOE, and he's kind of found this seemingly obscure Greer camp witness as a real opportunity to deep dive into the worldly operations of Black Op DOE projects. It's 2 hours. He made 2 parts, but he put it all into one interview. So you kind of get an hour sort of him really deeply delving into the original Weygandt interview in 1997 and all the details, and breaking down all this other official government stuff that was going on in that part of the world with the drug war and the Department of Energy. And then the second half, which is him kind of doing another interview, but is also him connecting all the dots with all the other pieces of evidence that he's been able to kind of gather and get up next to that corroborate Jonathan Weygandt's story, as kind of silly as it sounds at first, right? And it only sounds silly in certain ways. And like I said, in those ways are that, why'd they let him go? You know, like, why'd they let him go? They just let him go because they were going to discredit him and make him into a crazy, which seems like way more work than just, icing him in the jungle as the guys were threatening him with. But then where the axe that they're grinding on that is that the conspiracy and the cover-up and the CIA and the agents of the conspiracy and the cover-up use true stories like this as their vehicles in their method for obfuscating everything, all of it, the whole picture, the big picture, right? Which is all these little pieces that they kind of string together of the human trafficking, the psionic powered people, the Department of Energy operating black project programs under the disguise of kind of other black project programs that Congress is barely even admitting to. So it's fun. He's got he's got a 12-minute conclusion at the end here where he kind of says all that stuff. It's not really, probably since there's not a lot of UAP Gerb stuff, then it kind of all ends up in the required section of ufology because it's not a lot to go through. And you get a lot of info out of very small amounts of time put into UAP Gerb stuff. So it's definitely required in that sense. It's still kind of obscure, even in the ufology sense, but he is grinding that axe as far as the Department of Energy and all the details of the Department of Energy when it comes to UFOs.